Thanks very much, Diarmuid. You can all hear me okay, can you? I'm mic'd up here, but I'm not sure how well I'm mic'd up. Thanks for the welcome, Diarmuid, and thanks very much for the invitation to be with you this morning. It's great to see such a strong gathering at a conference like this, and indeed it's great to be able to witness the wonderful facilities that Diarmuid and his team have developed here in Griffith College, which are a great tribute to the team and everyone involved. Diarmuid has just billed my contribution here this morning as an overview of the higher education strategy. I don't propose to give you a very detailed overview of all of the analysis and content of that strategy, which is quite wide-ranging in terms of its full analysis and recommendations. So I'm going to spare you the very detailed tour, but what I would like to do is to highlight some particular aspects of it that I think have a direct relevance to the agenda of quality and excellence in higher education that you're dealing with here in your discussions today. And hopefully to try, in doing that, to set some broader context for the discussion on quality assurance and quality framework, in particular by talking about some of those wider challenges that face the system and how the strategy that was published back in January seeks to shape our collective national response to those. I spent the earlier part of this week at a meeting of DGs of higher education in Budapest, organised by the Hungarian presidency of the EU. And what's striking when you spend a couple of days like that with colleagues from systems across Europe is how familiar and how similar the challenges and the issues that we're all grappling with within our own systems are. And indeed, it's also striking when you participate in those kinds of discussions and listen to the sort of issues that people are dealing with, that we do have a high quality system here in Ireland, and when you kind of reflect on it, you sometimes do need to remind yourself of that as you're dealing on a day-to-day basis with the sort of the challenges and the issues for improvement and change. The meeting in Budapest was concerned with how you can protect and enhance the diversity of your higher education system as an important means of strengthening its responsiveness to the full range of demands on higher education systems in the modern economic era. And we do have a lot of strength in the Irish system in terms of the kind of diversity that we enjoy and the kind of diversity that exists in our system. And we've also other strengths in terms of the overall quality of our system that I think we should draw some reassurance from. But it is difficult, leaving aside, I suppose, the higher profile international rankings, the Shanghai and Times and so on, which have well-known limitations in terms of what they can tell us about systems. It is difficult to find objective or useful objective measures of how well higher education systems compare internationally. And that is an issue, I think, for us and for others internationally, where there have been objective measures, for example, around the employability of graduates or the efficiency of systems. Ireland has stood up well, and I'm thinking in particular of the ECOFIN study that was published last year. But equally, when we listen to major employers here in terms of their experience of the quality of the graduate pool that they draw from and some of the difficulties that they have in recruiting the right kinds of graduates and people with the right kinds of skills, we know that we have some issues. And I suppose the question that we have sort of stepping back from it is, where does the truth lie? How well is our system serving the needs of students in terms of helping them to reach towards their full potential? And how sure can we be of standards across the system in all quarters? And I think that goes to the heart of the discussion around quality and systems of quality assurance in the system. It also goes to the heart of the performance challenge that the higher education strategy lays down for the Irish system. Can we advance system performance across each element of the higher education mission? And can we develop the sufficiently robust systems of performance accountability that gives the wider confidence that's necessary in relation to how well our system is doing? And I suppose the challenge that the strategy attempts to frame a response to is around that, but it's around future-proofing the capacity and capability of our system to respond to what will be fast-changing demands and new challenges over the next 20 years. One of the things that we know, I mean, we can't be precise about the nature of the new challenges and the new demands that will come on the system over the next 20 years, but we do know that the extent of those changes and new demands will be very considerable. We know, for example, of the huge projected growth in demand for higher education. The strategy assumes a projected growth of 72% in demand over the next 20 years. And I think the history of projections of growth in higher education, which the Department of Education and Skills or the Department of Education and Science in the past would have produced, has always been that we've got the projections wrong. We have always understated the actual growth. So 72% is probably on the conservative side if history teaches us anything. And we can also anticipate radical demands, or radical changes rather, in the nature of learning and the nature of learners over the next 20 years. We also, we're very well aware of this, know that Ireland's need for economic renewal and economic development is going to rely very much on our capacity and our reputation for producing highly skilled, creative, innovative graduates, all directly related to the quality of provision right across the board. So really, the strategy is demanding new levels of responsiveness, new levels of connectedness between higher education and wider society, new levels of performance and new levels of quality from the system. And I stress those words, quality and responsiveness, very deliberately, because I think they're essentially the two bywords for what the strategy attempts to achieve in advancing performance within the Irish system. We want to improve quality, and we also want to improve the responsiveness of higher education to the broad range of demands on it now and over the next 20 years, in supporting government and in supporting wider society in achieving the broader development objectives that we have as a nation. So I suppose the vision that's set out up front in the strategy is fundamentally about quality. It's about the quality of the graduates we produce, and it's about the quality of responsiveness to those wide-ranging and changing demands. I'm going to focus just on the teaching and learning aspects of that for a few moments, because, as I say, there are a range of issues covered in the strategy around system change, around all of the missions of of higher education and research and in wider engagement in teaching and learning. But just on the teaching and learning aspects, there are a range of specific recommendations around improving quality on that front, and in particular the quality of the student experience in higher education that I think are worth focusing on. Those relate to improvements in our processes of teaching and learning, system improvements, including the need for individual academics to have teaching qualifications, the need for individual academics to engage in continuous professional development on an ongoing basis, through the need for all research active staff to teach undergraduates, the need for structured student feedback mechanisms at institutional and national levels, and in particular through a focus on the experience of students as they transition into higher education and transition out of higher education, the transition out relating to opportunities for work placement and service learning opportunities and so on. But the transition into higher education, the first year experience, is seen as critical and was identified by the strategy group as being particularly critical. And the strategy itself makes recommendations on how that can be improved through the development of generic learning outcomes as part of a broader first year experience, for example. And I think that's a point that needs to be reflected in the development of programmes and in the assessment of standards across the system. How we ensure that our programmes of undergraduate education benefit students more effectively from the outset of their learning experience as they enter into higher education, through equipping them with the kind of generic skills and tools that they will need as learners. There are also recommendations in relation to greater consistency and transparency of learning outcomes through the development of subject benchmarks. And again, these are very important in benchmarking overall system quality and in being able to verify the quality of standards across the board at undergraduate level. And there are obviously big challenges in bringing those forward. Hopefully today's discussion can perhaps help to offer some insights into possible approaches and so on as to how those can be advanced. Strengthening diversity and supporting autonomy linked to performance accountability are vital dimensions of that. challenge of enhancing responsiveness, and the quality of responsiveness is really core to what the strategy is identifying as being at the heart of the challenge for our higher education system. And if I could just return for a moment to that meeting of DGs of higher education held in Budapest earlier this week that I mentioned, it considered the need for diversity within European higher education and the impact that creating and maintaining diversity has on governance both at system and institutional levels. Diversity, as you know, can be understood in many different ways. Institutions can be diverse in their profiles, in their functions and roles, through their funding and governance structures, their programs and their means of delivery to different types of students. And in line with international thinking on this, the strategy explicitly emphasises the need for Ireland to retain and enhance and strengthen mission diversity in higher education. We know, and I don't think there was much dissent on this within the discussions of the strategy group. There was a lot of dissent on a lot of issues, I would have to say. But we know that if higher education is to serve the increasing demand and the growing complexity of demands that are placed on it, it won't be possible to have homogenous institutions all seeking to perform a similar range of functions and seeking to build similar strength on all fronts. So individual institutions are going to need to identify those elements of the variety of expectations on higher education that they believe they can build capacity to serve to an extremely high standard. That's the challenge for them. And the framework for change, including organisational reconfiguration that's set out in the strategy, aims to support institutions in doing that, in identifying their strengths and working to developing their strengths, identifying institutional strategies that relate to that. Today's conference here is concerned with mechanisms for shining a light on the internal workings of a higher education institution in terms of developing its quality processes and assessment and measurement and so on. But it's equally important that higher education institutions turn that light outwards to the wider communities and the society in which they operate, to fully engage with the needs of wider communities and to use that engagement to inform strategic mission. And that's the third pillar, I suppose, of the higher education mission that's given particular new prominence under this strategy, the broader engagement dimension. The second Glion Declaration discusses the great web of learning represented by schools, colleges, higher education institutions, families and social groups. And higher education institutions need to locate themselves not just within these educational networks, but within the broader ecology of the society that they serve. It's when those dynamics and interfaces are fully exposed that an institution can begin to match its internal strengths to what is required by an increasingly diverse cohort of students and by employers, enterprise, communities and so on within their regions. And I define those regions as local, national and international.